Hello, it's 10 o'clock. It is the 17th day of August 2021. I am your grumpy guide to all things gaming, the OGGM, with all the news, weather, and sports as it relates to the tabletop role-playing game hobby. It is RPG A Day 2021, Day 17. RPG A Day 2021, Day 17. And today's prompt, as if you cannot tell by the meme, trap. Today's prompt is trap. And there's a lot of different topics I could cover in related to that word. You know, the building of traps, where did the traps come from? How come the traps never trap the bad guys and only trap the heroes? But let's focus on something a lot more smaller and intrinsic. The detecting of traps. Is that something that should be actively done by the player characters or passively done by the DM, and then the DM gives them hints? Now, I could just walk in a room and say, I detect traps. No ifs, ands, or buts. I have no clues, but, you know, I'm in a dungeon, there's a room, I'm going to detect traps. At which point, you could be very immersive about it and explain to them how you go about looking for the traps, and the DM could be very immersive and say, you know, these are the steps you do, and this is what you get. You hear a clicking noise, and, you know, or it could be very straightforward and mechanical and just roll a dice. Okay, yeah, there's a trap. That's each individual term. As for how long it takes to detect a trap, that's also sort of nebulous. I mean, it's not like you have a magic ability where you can just scan the room with your X-ray and go trap, trap, trap. I assume detecting a trap takes some level of movement, effort, looking around, poking, prodding, unless it's like a really obvious trap, like, you know, a big pile of birdseed in the center of the room with a sign that says free birdseed. That's a pretty obvious trap. But I assume that in the cases of traps, they're probably hidden, because otherwise, what would be the point? So yeah, I suppose you could just walk in a room, and if you're experienced enough and skilled enough, you could just see that, oh, that stone is a little out of place compared to the rest of the stones. But generally, I would assume there's some level of time investment and perhaps poking, prodding tools. So again, is that an active thing where you have the player characters roll, or should it be a passive thing where the DM rolls and then gives clues based upon the rolls? I mean, let's say you're walking down a hallway and no one is actively looking for traps, but there's a trap. Do you give them a hint as the DM? Do you roll and go, oh, character number 3 made his check, so I have to give him a hint? Or do you just let the let the dominoes fall as they will? It's tough. And then we could get into the whole thing about the immersion and how immersive is the trap hunting as opposed to just pure mechanics, but that's not the point of this vlog. Let's keep this short and sweet. Player characters do have, in most cases, the ability to actively search for traps via some mechanic depending upon the game. It could be a perception roll, an awareness roll. It could literally have a skill that says detect traps. You have to assume that if they're actively detecting traps, there is some form of expenditure of energy, time, and possibly materials involved, even if it's just tapping the floor in front of you with a stick. But then there's also the passiveness. I mean, there is a trap in this hallway. They're walking down this hallway. They're about to go over the trap. Do I give them a hint? Or do I just let things happen because none of them said I was detecting for traps? And then, of course, how do you deal with the argument? Oh, but I was detecting for traps because I'm a blah and I have a blah. It's like, well, you weren't actively detecting for traps. You didn't tell me you were looking for traps. It should just be assumed I'm always looking for traps because I'm the blah and the blah. No, it should not be assumed that they're always looking for traps. They should need to tell you that they're looking for traps because, again, looking for traps has some investment of time, energy, and possibly materials. You know, it's not a magic ability. Now, the game could include a passive rule for spotting things. D&D 5th edition has included a passive perception rule, and other games might have a rule where you, the DM, actually make the rolls, and they don't make the rolls at all. And then if there's a trap, you give them a hint, and if there's not a trap, then you just make them paranoid because you're rolling dice. It's a very slippery slope. It's a very interesting question. I suppose it depends upon each DM. I wish D&D had better rules for detecting traps, and especially passively, and how many clues you're supposed to give them. And do you just outright say trap, or do you say in clues? And again, it sort of just breaks down to how much energy do you want to invest as a storyteller? How much energy are they investing as a character? But bottom line, yes, assume that if they are actively looking for traps, there is some time, effort, energy, and possibly materials involved. But if they're not actively looking for traps, that has to be clearly stated. You have to clearly state, oh, I didn't hear. You did not say you were looking for traps when you went down the hallway. And then it's up to you, the DM, whether you give them hints or not. If you're a nice DM, and if it's, the kind of trap that might have a hint, then you could give them hints. But if you're a mean DM, or like me, or if it's the kind of trap that wouldn't have any clues, then do you have to give them a hint if they're not actively looking? And how much information do you give them if they are actively looking? Again, immersion is up to you. You could just say trap, or you could be more mysterious about it and you say something's about that thing is wrong. You see a glint of light, there's a crack, whatever. It's always fun. It's always interesting. Traps are always a good topic to ponder. Today's word is trap. Please press the trap and subscribe to this blog if you haven't yet. Help me hit 1,000 subs. Till then, it's a trap. Oh, it's a sandwich. The sandwich is also a trap.